So I'd really love to talk about blocking and marking rehearsal. For younger actors, that can be a really charged moment because it's the first time they're stepping onto set, and a lot of younger actors don't really know what is meant to be accomplished in this particular rehearsal. Could we talk about each of your processes? And I know, especially with Elle, you were saying that you like location to be a character. So how do you incorporate location as a character in your blocking and marking rehearsal?
So I'm kind of one side of an extreme of a director that, like, I have a very specific way I want to film something. I use the location as a character and also the camera as a character. So every shot that I have is very intentional. I never do handheld. I never kind of discover things in my camera movements. Like, my DP and I have it all planned out beforehand, so my blocking is very precise. So on my sets, like, yes, the actors can experiment with their movements and things like that, but, like, not really. Because it's like, I've built this world and you have to play in my very specific confines of it. Some directors are not like that. But in the world of horror, which is where I come from, it has to be so specific in how you're building up to a scare, especially with the visuals, that sometimes, like, there isn't room to play. So we can play in how you want to deliver lines and even what your lines are, but where you are needs to stay where I need you to be. And some actors, that's a big change for them. And I tell them going in, like, I'm a very specific type of director. And so sometimes I don't vibe with certain actors in that way. But I think that there are actors that push me, and there's actors that I push on, and then it's kind of a give and take. But in terms of, like, hitting your marks and blocking, like, it's very, like, if they respect my blocking, then I will respect them enough in later takes to be like, all right, if you get what I need, then we can play. And then we can all kind of relax, and maybe we'll discover things. But I can't be in the discovery phase in the first couple times because I have a very specific plan of how this is going to build to be scary. And I think the actors that I have enjoyed working with the most are the ones that respect that and then push me later, because we're both learning and growing. You know, like, I don't walk on a set and think that I know everything, because if I did, then why would I even be there? Why would I be making this film? It's, like, always a journey. Same with the actors. So, you know, I'm just very particular in how I work, and I look for a relationship with an actor that we can both kind of respect each other and grow in making this film.
Yeah, I feel like if you're the extreme, I'm, like, in the middle, I guess. So it's like I know. So to answer your question specifically about, like, a younger actor coming on the set, and knowing what that time is, I try to make it just for blocking. Sometimes it becomes a pseudo rehearsal depending on how eager they are. They have questions. It's the first time they're seeing me that day or something like that. So I usually explain, even if it's like a season act, like, okay, cool, we get there, we'll maybe have a little banter, and then I always say almost this exact phrase verbatim. So this is what I'm thinking. You start here, you come over here, and you do this. And I'm thinking you come over here and do this, and how do you guys feel about that? I'm like, oh, cool, let's try it out, cool. And then I'm leaving the door open, but in the back of my mind, that's the blocking I want. There's another blocking that I'm like, okay, if they decide to do this, and there's, like, there's a prop, the space is also a character as well, but it's like, the best example is, so I shoot this scene for a short film, and the actor comes in, and I just need him to have a response to an image in the room. But I've duplicated his image in multiple ways. So he gets in there, he's like a seasoned actor, he's worked like multiple seasons of the show. Well, he comes up, so what do you need me to do? And I was like, well, you pretty much populate this seat, and then, when you give that line, you look around, and it's like, you can look at the poster here, there's a comic book over here, or you can look at the desk and play here. And he looks at me, he goes, because he's like, I get to play, right? I can discover. And I know, like, camera-wise, we can make the adjustment, we can do whatever, but he gets to move around. So we block it out, we play around. He's like, all right, cool. And he goes with the first idea, which is I wanted to look at the poster, just kind of gaze. But I had all the other things around. So I think it's more so coming in that space, and I think as a director, you kind of set the tone at that moment, because that's the first time where everyone's kind of like, okay, so what do you want us to do? Like, what are we here to do? So for me, it's like having that moment where it's like, okay, this is what I'm thinking. This is how I'm gonna, kind of laying it out, and then opening the invitation, because most likely in my experience, no one's 85% of the time, the blocking pretty much is going to be the blocking. It's not even usually until after maybe a take or like a true rehearsal that maybe a good actor is like, hey, maybe I'm slower to this, or they just want something to justify the action a little bit more. And it's usually like a yes and situation. It's not like a derailing of the process. So it's more so coming and just being receptive and being like actively engaged in what's being shared, so that you can actually contribute if you do want to change, versus like being,
I think there's the initial blocking, and then there's camera blocking. And so there's just like showing up to the scene and doing the initial blocking rehearsal, silent on set, everybody get the hell out of there. And then there's the camera blocking for lighting and all of that jazz. And so like, I think those two processes for young actors are very different, because the preliminary blocking is like pretty straightforward. You're like understanding the room, how you're going to interact with props, beating through the scene to get the whole thing. And then it's like, how are we going to do our wide master? Where's that going to live? Where's our coverage going to be? Where are the specific marks that need to be hit in close-up going to be? And if the scene is playing out like that, I think that part is where it can get overwhelming for someone who's not interacted with the camera in that many ways yet. And I think that's where it can be really helpful to just like slow things down to a microscopic level sometimes, of just being like, here's our scene. We're going to sort of cover it from this side, and then at this moment, we're going to like move over here, and we're going to cover this in this way. And then they start to like feel the character as like, feel the camera as a character with them. And then once you go light and everybody, starts doing their thing, they sort of like get it. It's wrapped so many times.
You mentioned that you're discussing coverage during that time as well. Is that something that you find helpful?
Discussing coverage?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I guess there's just so many types of scenes that it's sort of case by case, but like I'm imagining from what we're talking about, like an interior living room scene, like a scene that has a lot of movement. It might be like a 5-page scene with a lot of coverage needed for the edit, and like those scenes are almost sometimes the hardest, because like you need the scene to move, you need to maintain the energy, you're in a confined space where you're going to be flipping and all the technicality of it, but like ultimately all the actors need to know is like, this is the stage, and here are like 3 situations where that stage is going to change, and like your concept of home base is going to shift a little bit. And I think that's really, seasoned actors know like, okay, we're going to flip the shot now, and that's going to make everything look different, and everything's going to sort of feel different. And
And you bring up a really good point, that there are two blocking rehearsals.
Yep.
And for a young actor to understand that when you come to set, generally a well-run set, the crew is going to go take 5. You're going to have some time with the director, and oftentimes with the DP as well, just to get a sense of what's going on. And you're going to work the scene. You're going to have that moment. You're going to find out whether sitting on the couch makes more sense than standing. All of those things are going to be discovered and collaborated. Actors have to make sure they use their voice and say, I feel really weird saying I love you from here. I would rather say it from... That's when your chance.
And that's like the time to do it.
Absolutely. And then you get that and you take that time. That time is so valuable for both actor and director, and for DP. I've worked with DPs who don't want to be a part of it until we've got it buttoned up and they're outside smoking cigarettes. I've worked with DPs who want to absolutely be there for all of it, because sometimes you can get into the weeds really easy when they know that wall won't fly. And you're like, you can't go there, it's a bad zone. That kind of stuff's great, but that's where it gets hammered out. And then once everyone's comfortable, everyone has to flow, it feels natural, it works, the crew comes in, everyone sees what's going on, and that's what we're going to start working on. I'm a big fan of camera movement. I don't love lock-off shots unless they're necessary. So I always work with actors and explain to them, that this is going to be happening while you're doing this, and this is why you're moving here, and why this is the right time to do that, and et cetera, et cetera. So those 2 rehearsals are just so key for everybody.
I think you bring up a really interesting point, that this actually takes me back to like my very first semester of film school. And this sticks with me to this day. It was the very first thing I ever learned in film school. They wouldn't let us move the camera on anything, and they just taught us to block talent to close up, like doing your camera movement within the frame. Mm-hmm. And I think for for actors to know what that means. Like if you're blocking from wide to close, that's as powerful as a dolly into your face.
Sure.
And like when you're doing a blocking rehearsal and then the camera comes in and you set the camera and you realize that like, oh, you were over there and now you're here and the camera is right here and the focus is now on your face and the key is hitting you like this becomes a close-up. So this wasn't just a stage now, this is now a shot. And I think like it's one of those things where it's like a lot of information that you have to sort of move past, but I think once you start to like feel this is the melody and it lands here for the end of this shot.
Yeah.
And then you start to see the 3 acts of the shot and the melody takes place while the camera's rolling, not so much in the scene in your head.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's the biggest hurdle for, at least for actors that come from the stage, is like, the stage is not the movie, the stage is the shot now, and that only exists while the camera's rolling.
That's
think
a great sentence.
a big thing for me coming from acting background is in acting school, I remember we had to do a semester where we were prop actors. And I remember how hard it was for everyone because you memorize your lines really sitting down, and that's something I learned immediately. I was like, I'm never memorizing lines sitting down ever again. I'm going to do different activities with it. So as a director, my blocking comes from the minute that actor is cast. If I know there's a scene in the film, like I just wrapped a short 2 weekends ago where I knew we had this huge dinner scene, and I know that some actors do memorize sitting down, and they're gonna show up to set not having practiced, passing food around and eating and cutting up steak and stuff like that. I tell them from the beginning, hey, there's this huge dinner scene. You're going to be passing around plates. What I want you to do when you're rehearsing the lines for that is practice playing with a tennis ball or holding a fork and knife in your hands, practice doing the dishes while you deliver those lines in your house. And then they show up to set and they understand. They may not know the exact technical blocking of it yet, but they have it in their bodies already, where we don't have to sit here and do 100 takes because now a line, I'm so stiff, I don't remember how to cut on a plate. And I think going back to the extreme of what you were saying of very specific blocking, I think with a lot of my projects that are very intimate, there is really specific blocking where I'm like, you can't play around with it. When it comes to those intimate scenes, we have to treat it like choreography, and I come from a dance background. So with blocking those kinds of scenes, I don't want actors in their head about, I'm doing a sex scene or a rape scene. I tell them, treat it like choreography, like this is what's happening, place your hand here. And we're gonna do it the same way every single time so that your brain never flips into, oh my gosh, is this happening to me? Oh my gosh, am I in character right now? I never want that to happen. So the blocking is always really intentional, and I think that's a huge part of how I direct those kinds of scenes. And then when it comes to more, a casual dinner scene, I'm not really gonna care if in the wide you pass the peas instead of the chicken in the first take, if I'm explaining to you, like, we're gonna cut to a close after this. And I think that's proving to your point of talking about coverage with actors is important, because then they know too where they can play around.
So one thing that jumps out to me, I've just been thinking about like what beginning actors really need, and it's footage for their reels more often than not. Like their biggest frustration is they're not getting footage fast enough. It's 18 months before the fucking asshole director will give them some footage. And like, I'm guilty of that. And I like look back on doing that in the past, and I should just give them dailies. Like it's for the fucking short film. It's like not that big of a deal. But ultimately, when you're thinking, I think as an actor about like, okay, your capital in the short film that you're doing for free is the footage. And it might come down to 3 shots that are gonna be in your reel. And not that you should be getting granular with your performance, because ultimately you're there to be in the film, but knowing what those shots mean, the difference between nailing the master and nailing your big close-up of that scene, it's really powerful to know why doing those things really well in the way that those 2 different types of shots are executed well, why that's effective. And like with the master, for example, like coming from an editing background and being an editing director, it's important to know, like, if you nail the master, you might have a great long master shot in a scene, which is just like, for everybody watching, everybody loves that. And that's a great thing to know, is like, if you go into the scene and you rehearse the blocking and you can spend your energy just really nailing the master shot, you're you're creating the magic before you do all the coverage. And then in your close-up, you just have to know that like the scene is building to that. Like that close-up is more than likely the climax, and it's only happening one time. We're only going this close once in the whole scene. And I think when actors that I've known as they're coming up are like thinking about what do they need on their reel, what do they need to show their range and their ability, it's blocking and carrying a scene for 10, 15, 20 seconds of a shot and a great close-up. And it's like if you can nail those things, and God forbid you can get the raw footage from the director and like have material for your reel, like that's the material. And like that's also the material that makes you give your director great work, is like knowing why you need those shots, because you need them for the same reason that the editor needs them. So
having started as an actor, I approach blocking and my whole planning as an actor. So intellectually, I break down a script into beats and measures first to hit emotional context, which informs camera position, informs blocking, it informs everything, right? But the opposite of what Elle was saying, I prefer to get to a set and put the actors out, always have a plan, always have an idea, but put the actors into the scene and say, okay, let's feel this, put it on his feet. But they're gonna need something to start with, because if you just drop them in a set and say, okay, do something, they're, I don't know. So you gotta start, okay, we're gonna start with you over there, and you're probably gonna come over here on this, but let's put it on his feet and try it. And then when we do that, and we run it a couple of times, the DP comes in, and then it's a rehearsal of me walking around, watching that rehearsal and saying, okay, from here, okay, from here, and then we're gonna do this, right? And that's where everything gets discovered for me, and we figure out the whole shebang. Plus, I want to take the entire scene, whether it's being broken up over 3 or 4 days or a week or whatever, I want to block it all at once.
Yeah.
Yep.
Let's take that whole scene, break it all down, and figure out what our plan is for the next day, week, whatever, so that we don't run into that, oh, it can't fly out that wall.
Right.
Oh, shit, I put them in a corner,
Right.
and what we're gonna do now. All of that is important.
It's a perfect combination of engineering and reverse engineering, all at the same time. It really is, you know, it's and then for an actor, for a young actor to be, again, put into that dangerous situation where all these moving parts are coming at you, it's really important just to have that trust of the director, have the trust in the process, and also trust yourself to be the human being that you've been asked to be. And that's the hard part, is to make sure that your blocking also is very human. It also, it drives the scene, it drives your shots, it drives your edit, but it only connects with the audience if it's human. And that's where everyone has to work together.
That's really big. I think sometimes, like you were saying earlier, you kind of come up on set and it's like overwhelming, right? Especially like if it's just, you know, you, me, and your scene partner, and then the DP shows up and other people start to show up, and it just feels like everyone's watching. I think people do forget, especially as younger actors, it's like you're still a human. You have to touch things and do things. They kind of like, wait, I don't remember. It's like, yeah, when you finish drinking, you put the glass down, you can do certain things.
Right.
Like, and those are extreme cases, right? I've dealt with those, you know, earlier on when we were doing like short films and student projects and things like that, where it's like, oh man, you still keep washing the dishes when these things happen, or keep doing these things. So I think it's really interesting that you say that, because like you were saying, you get there, you want to give them the space to kind of move around, but the thing we are depicting is like true life and intention. And I think the specialty of what you do as a horror, you know, as a horror director, or even if you were, you know, making Wes Anderson like films, it's like, yeah, you need to hit this mark, because it's still telling the story. There's still truth to that. So I think it's more so you not forgetting like the causality of how you're moving through the space and why you're moving through the space. And I think,
like my biggest pet peeve when I see when actors like send me footage of them, you know, or even when I'm just watching TV or movies, is when it isn't believable, like when actors are just standing there, like no one just stands there, like with their, I was watching this whole series like 2 weeks ago, and one of the main characters would just stand with their arms down by their side, like in every shot. And it was like, I was like, no one does that. Like they'd be they'd be moving around. So it's like you're given these, you know, marks to hit, but your body is still your body and you're still human. And like that's what you need to bring to life to this film. So, you know, I think when you're an actor, I think even though you're playing within these very specific confines that have been created for you, like in my films, it's like you're still in this frame, and that's your frame to bring life to. And it's in those like specific little human movements that really bring life to
If
this.
your nose itches, scratch it.
Yeah, like
100%.
I think like another thing that beginning actors sort of come up against is like you're working with two types of directors. You're either working with one of your contemporaries, or you've just gotten a break and you're being put in something and you're jumping up into deep water really quickly. And those are two really different scenarios. If you're on an indie set with a 6-person crew and you know the director because you've made a few short films together, it's a really specific working environment, and there's probably a lot of things that aren't done like up to code. But a great learning experience from that is know the director. Like, you know them. What do you know about them? What do you know about the way that they make movies? If you have an opportunity and it's a good director, watch one of their movies with them and ask them questions about it. Say, why did you do this way? Or how does this make you feel? And like start to understand why, like how directors make movies their own. And when you get hired onto a big movie, look at that director's work and see what jumps out at you as being unique. Like, just strictly talking about blocking, is that director really cutty? If that director is really cutty, like know that you're going to go in and you're going to be shooting a ton of coverage and a ton of takes, and the scenes are going to take, quite a long time. Or are you going to live on a master for a long time? Is the pacing this or is it that? And I think really getting a sense of like, as you do more and more movies, you start to feel like, what am I kind of expecting going in working with this director? Like, because it's not going to be the same with everybody, and you're going to start to feel like, oh, this person is this kind of director, and the film is going to look this way, and we're doing this way because this is the intention. And I've now seen that across a lot of different people, and I think just like a great at-home exercise for that is like if you have the chance to watch a movie with a director or one of the director's films, like one-on-one, like talk about it, like understand the movie and the style, and like that learning process I think is crucial, because that's what seasoned actors do. Like, they watched a million movies, they've been in a million movies, and they know going into a movie, they've already seen the director's work, they know all the little things that are unique to that person, and they know what they're going to get.
Yeah, you described something kind of interesting in the way all of us have been talking about working with actors, but there's something which hasn't really been mentioned, which I think needs to be, and that is you're starting out, you're a young actor, and you get that job, and you have a line. And we haven't really mentioned that, because as directors, that one line's key, and you hired the person, you have such bigger fish to fry, and oftentimes that actor is not going to get a lot of pomp and circumstance. They're going to be sitting in a one-hole trailer, maybe with a toilet, possibly not. They have that one line, it's a big deal to them, this is their big moment, and you've got to knock this shot out so you can do the company move.
Yeah.
And they deserve to have their moment, and we deserve to get the line so we can do the company move. And it's something that an actor needs to just be very cognizant of, that all of these sort of parameters we've been discussing are absolutely omnipresent for all actors, no matter what their role is. But because of the confines of what we do for a living and all of the technical involved and the timing and the money, unfortunately, actors have to be prepared to not be cognizant that they don't matter or that their line doesn't matter, but to be cognizant of the realities of what we're all up against, and to understand it's time to come in and do that moment. And it's a very daunting thing, because especially if you're not part of a cast, especially if you don't have that time with the director to get to know their work, or to have that one-on-one, or you don't even get a rehearsal outside of that day. You show up, it's just one little thing, it's the guy, the clerk, he's just, do you want
Or
fries?
it's TV and there's no director voice in it at all.
At
You're
all.
just showing up with a personality.
100%. So
Yeah.
that is an important thing for a young actor, to be prepared to come up and have your ideas, be open-minded, and listen, and know that you're fitting into a massive puzzle. You're just one little piece, and you're just as important to everybody else, but if you didn't get that wink or that special moment that you were really hoping to have on your first day, that's okay. You'll get there.
Yeah.
And of course, directors have to be, and all film artists have to be very cognizant of how impactful it is. I mean, I did a job as an actor. I was working one day. I had 2 lines. It was a favor. I knew some of the people on the show. I didn't know the director at all. I came in, I had wardrobe, I had all this, the makeup, the whole thing, and I showed up, and I could just tell the director was like, can we just do this? We're running late, and it was that whole thing, and I just knew right off the bat, just because I have the experience, but young actors don't. I had the experience to say, okay, let's just do this. Let's just do this, and it's a very unique skill set to have the confidence to understand that these little moments that you're going to do along your journey to get to a very collaborative space is sometimes not collaborative at all. You hit your mark, you come in, you do your thing. So those are the things that you need to hone. What's a mark? You got to hit it. Where's your eye line? These sorts of things. And sometimes you're not given that information. Sometimes you're just there and you're like, okay, you're going to go, and you say, boom, boom, go, let's go. And the bell goes off and you're like, and this is very common. It's happened to me, and I've seen it happen to a lot of actors, and that's something I'm very, very prepared for. And these kinds of forums are really helpful for that, because it's all the same every single shot, every single scene. Now, if you're working with an actor you're 9 months with on a huge project, a TV show, there's a different relationship, but when you come in for that one little piece, it's just as important and just as crazy, even if you don't get the pomp and circumstance.
That's awesome. We'd like to start to wrap it up only for time, but I want to ask one final question for everyone that we could go around. It won't be as hard as our opener. That was just so
Do we
much
need
fun
to
to
stretch
watch.
before this one?
Yeah, that's a good one. What does the ideal actor-director relationship look like for you?
That's way harder.
Great.
I remember we said any more difficult questions before we. Oh no, nothing to worry about.
I feel
Wow.
like that's a question my therapist would ask me.
Right,
What do
definitely.
you want?
What is the ideal? So
yeah.
the question is, what does the ideal actor-director
Actor-director
relationship look like?
For you personally, yeah.
For
For your
me.
style, for how you like to work.
I'll dive in. It's trust and communication. That's what it has to be. And trust that I am going to have your back and have the whole picture in my head, and to make sure that what you're going to give me and the vulnerability that I want you to have, you don't have to analyze it or think about it. I'm going to be watching your back. And then the constant communication back and forth between what you're feeling, how that was, what your intention is, what your confusion is, what the clarification needs to be. Trust and communication is everything.
Well, I think that sums it up.
I
We're good.
I think building off of that, I think feeling safe with my actors as a director, because it's like I'm always, there's this voice in my head constantly that's like, do they like what they're doing? Like what I wrote, do they actually like this? Is this a job for them? Why are they here? Are they going to be proud of it when we're done? Like those kind of questions eat away at me as a director, and I'm a very empathetic person, and I'm sensitive about my work because most of my work I write as well. So I think the best relationships that I have with actors after the process is done, we still feel safe with each other and are proud of what we did together. Even if it didn't turn out great, we still look at it for what it was and the experience that we had. And those are the kind of relationships that I want to keep and move forward with, because I know that they're going to trust me on the next project, and I'm going to trust them because we both are enjoying what we're doing. So I think sometimes we get a little lost in the business of it, but I think like a lot of us are still sensitive artists, and I try to be sensitive to that.
Beautiful.
I know for me it's just give and take. For both of us, providing each other the same safe space to both communicate, and to both be vulnerable. Because if you're not vulnerable at all with an actor, I feel like they're not going to be vulnerable with you. So to get a true performance, you have to also be willing to go there, to be weak at the time that you are weak, and let them see that, and know that it's not going to overcome you, but you're human here too, and we're all in this together. Otherwise, things get really robotic.
Yeah.
So it's
Build-
give and take.
Building off that, I think like creative vulnerability is such a thing that you build over a long time with somebody, and what jumps into my mind is the best relationships are ones that are multi-project, and that you develop a shorthand and you're not having to make as many assumptions. But what that really boils down to in the moment for me is acknowledging that like you're going to do your very best to be creatively vulnerable with each other, and you're going to forgive each other when shit hits the fan. Like one person snaps or this person snaps, it's just like just chill, move on. It's like it happens. You're in a high stress environment, and it's just like, I think being able to constantly like separate and come back together and panic and resolve and like have that be a river that really like works well. And that does come back to trust too, is like you really have to just know that like you have each other's backs. Like the directors and the actors, like everybody's there for the actors, and the director's there to protect you from all those eyeballs.
Yep.
And
It all builds
Yeah.
on a topic, you know,
Yeah.
trust
Yeah.
and,
Yeah.
and communication provides a give and take, provides a feedback, provides
Mhm.
all these
Yeah.
things. So I would say yours is, ultimately, your comment is ultimately the core of the perfect director-actor relationship is trust and communication.
and like you earn that trust though. The
Yeah,
director has to
100%.
earn the actor's trust,
Yeah.
and that's
I imagine we probably do more for it than they have to do, because it's like, I don't know, I think the thing, so the ideal relationship is just like creative intimacy. When I think about intimacy, I think about, it's not about, like trust and communication has to be at the core, right? That leads itself to vulnerability. But like you said, there's even if there's a deep intimacy, if we have it or we can build it, it can be on one project, but you can look at your actor and know like, okay, they need something. I mean, I know what it is, right? Because we are kind of open to each other in this way. I can kind of figure out maybe what that is, or I can kind of hold space for it. I can ask. I've asked for a close set. I've asked for a moment for an actor because I'm just deeply, and I think we all probably are. I think to be a good director, you probably have to be empathetic, and of course that's on the spectrum. But I think we are sensitive, so therefore we know the actors are. You know, I would argue some directors are even more sensitive than some actors because there's so much. So I think at the core of it is deep creative intimacy, because then it's like I see you, you see me, and that could result in a multitude of things, right?
Yeah.
Because I can even know that I can know like, oh, I'm annoying to you, and that's okay, and you know my intention is not to annoy you, but you're like, but we can still have a great time. It's like, oh, you do that thing, or vice versa. I think that comes with a certain level of intimacy, and like I think that's probably the most ideal.
Yeah, it's like any relationship.
Yeah.
It's mutual
Yeah.
trust, mutual
Yeah.
understanding, remember the victories and forget the mistakes, right?
Mhm.
Like,
Mhm.
so.
I think there's something really beautiful in panic and resolve too.
Mhm.
Actually, I'd like to name a company that
Panic and Resolve.
put it on t-shirts, 'cause there's
There
a
it
lot
is.
of truth to that.
Yeah, like we as directors are rooting for you as an actor.
Yeah.
Like we're all tied to each other.
Oh, 100%.
So it's like you've got to be rooting for me too,
Yeah.
and I'll be rooting for you, and then that's how we're gonna succeed.
The actors don't really understand the power that they hold, and maybe this might be a little insight to it. When you are working on a project as a filmmaker, director, you have all these powers that be against you: time, money, crew, location, everything else. A huge break from that is a connection with your performer.
Mm-hmm.
They have a gift.
Yeah.
They can literally silence all of it if you can get into that moment together.
I think a piggyback on that too is like for young actors, like you're not always going to work with great directors. You're not
Oh,
you're not always
yeah.
going to
Yeah.
work with
Forgot about that
directors.
part.
You're not always going to work with directors that care about actors. You might work with a director who's like wants to make action films and is going to rush you through the
You're a piece of
performances.
meat. Yeah.
Right, and you're going to feel like that because that's the way that director is. Then you're going to work with a director that demands silence and wants to workshop with you and really knows that you are the reason that the film is going to have life. And like over the course of several years of getting into acting, that's going to be a spectrum of people you're going to work with. In some films you're going to end up hating the experience, in some films you're going to love it, and like that's where that experience comes from, and like where that knowledge comes from of how all the pieces fit together.
Yeah, because even our conversation is kind of idyllic, but I think about like my friends who are actors, and they'll call me and be like, so I'm on this set with this director. I don't know what they want. They haven't really spoken. They haven't really said anything. They nod, they
Commercial
whatever.
director.
Hey, wasn't gonna keep it up, right? But so for me, you're right, number one. But yeah, you will. This is a great bunch. I think truthfully, right? There's so many other personality types and archetypes within the spectrum, but I think for the actor, I think it does boil down to what you said. There is a power, there is something. For me, I'm a big cheerleader on set, right? So I'm 6'3", I'm 200 pounds, my voice is a little bit of a rumble, but even if an actor does something, right, I always tell people my favorite part is that experience between pictures up to cut, because then everything is silent, I'm watching them. If they do something, I have a visceral response for it, right? So even if I've been meek the whole day, or if I've been whatever,
You're watching a movie.
Yeah, I'll yell, I'll affirm. I know my goal is to affirm. Now, depending on the actor and their temperament, I was like, I may overwhelm this actor by just screaming at them, but I come and I let them know, like, yes, yes, that's all. And they're like, yeah, I'm like, yes, right? And all those things kind of, because that's where it is. Like, we're here for that for those like 45 seconds.
So is everybody on set, by the way.
Exactly, because everyone else will feed off.
No one's humping gear up a hill because they want to hump gear up a hill.
They
They want to be part of these moments that are captured forever, and they matter. And it's it's all about extraction and recreating life, whether it be in terror or in pain or happiness, sadness, comedy, whatever. And that extraction and that moment is all for really this conversation. It's for the actor to bring that to us, so that we can capture that moment and keep it forever. And that's really a powerful thing, and it's a gift.
I think, speaking to what everyone has said here, I think a big thing is back to communication and trust, but allowing yourself to be in a place where you can both be open to anything and attached to nothing, and to kind of learn from each other on set. That's a big thing for me, and being able to read the actor, like you were saying, and know when they need those moments where you're going to call it rather than them. And even just having enough instinct in who they are as an actor to be able to trust whether or not they can pull off what you need them to, or if there's an added element. I think for scenes where characters are super emotional, I'm the type that's like, I think you should take 5, listen to a song that's going to get you into that place, or think about something, take that moment for yourself, because I know maybe they're not the type of actor that can just go like that, because I've been working with them or I've seen how they are throughout the day. And I think also just allowing yourself the opportunity to really let them know that you are there for them as the director. But also a big thing for me is I make it very clear from the time that I hire them, because of some of the scenes that we're doing, you're not going to look the prettiest, and I need you to get to that vulnerable stage where you don't care about the look. And a big thing with that is I always tell them, I'm never going to, make you as the actor look bad or the character, but at the end of the day, I need you to put the character first when it comes to those moments. I think that's a big thing with like actors like Viola Davis, where she's crying snot tears and doing takes for that, she's not really thinking, how's my hair right now, so just allowing them to understand we are all here and they are just as big a part of the film as you are as the director.
That's great. I'm so happy we were able to gather such a diverse and amazing group of directors today from all different genres and temperaments on set. Just kidding. You're all
I'm a
amazing.
screamer.
Yeah. This has been amazing, and I'm really excited to get this out to an audience of newer actors or emerging filmmakers who are looking for answers that they're not finding because maybe they aren't getting booked yet on things, and so they don't have that experience. So I'm sure this is going to be very helpful, and it was very moving sometimes to hear that consensus of trust and communication and collaboration and vulnerability on set. So thank you guys all so much for being a part of this.
Thank you.
This is quite beautiful. I kind of want to do it every week.
It's our therapy session.
Like therapy.